A while back, I sat at a kitchen table with a ranch family where the son had come back to the operation. He and his wife only plan on having 2 kids. The 2 kids they did have were both girls, and the dad, the grandpa, asked him more than once, "Son, don't you want to try for a boy?" Now, mind you, this grandpa had 30 grandkids already. Out of those 30, only 5 were boys. 2 were never married, and 2 were adopted. So in his mind, this one son was the last chance to carry on that family name. And somehow that pressure landed right on the daughter-in-law, which, for the record, I might add, it tells me 2 things. 1, he didn't quite understand how genetics worked. And 2, if he had been raising cattle instead of worrying about grandkids, he would have figured out pretty quickly that the male determines the sex of the calf. But that story raises an interesting question. How important is carrying on the family name when we're talking about who takes over the farm?
Welcome to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where we help farmers, ranchers, and business owners create a seamless transition plan for the future. From retirement to ownership transfer, we protect what you've built and guide you every step of the way.
Welcome back to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. I'm Heidi Olson, and for more than 2 decades, I've worked with farm and ranch families, helping them navigate estate planning, succession planning, and the complicated process of transitioning a farm from one generation to the next. And if there's one thing I've learned sitting at hundreds of farm kitchen tables, succession planning isn't just about the soil under our feet. It's about people, expectations, and sometimes it's about traditions that go way back generations to the homesteaders. Today, we're talking about something that comes up in nearly every succession conversation. The idea that everything should be equal, and how sometimes that idea runs headfirst into the wall of reality. Because when it comes to farms, fair and equal are rarely the same thing. Most parents start with the same thought. We want to treat all of our kids equally. Sure, that thought comes from good intentions, but they don't want conflict with their children or resentment for that matter. And they sure as heck don't want one child feeling favored over another. But farms are not like savings accounts, where you just divide up the balance 4 ways and everyone walks away happy. A farm is a business. It's more than bank accounts. It's land, equipment, debt, taking risks, keeping an eye on the weather. And usually one person or maybe one couple is doing the day-to-day work of keeping it all going. So when families divide everything equally without thinking through the long-term impact, very rarely does the farm survive the next generation. I've seen situations where 3 siblings inherit land, 1 farms, 2 live in town, and very quickly, the farming siblings find themselves in a tough position. Now they're renting land from their own family, or trying to buy them out, or competing with outside tenants because the non-farming children think the rent should be higher, or they are influenced by their spouses. Hey, if your brother pays more in rent, we can afford to buy a new boat. And if he doesn't pay what we're asking, we'll put it up for bids, and he'll have to bid against his neighbor. Now the siblings no longer get along, and owning property in equal shares becomes a business negotiation with vultures, looking at the farming business as a cash cow. As owners, you may not have wanted the farm to be operated this way, but the reality is that if you only state your intentions for how you want your kids to operate their 1/3 share, they're not going to follow through after you're gone. There's nothing holding them to your verbal wishes, and this plan won't match the reality of running a farm. All right, here's a quick sideline story. My husband's grandpa had a quarter of land come up for sale in the area. The owner and homesteader couldn't make his payments anymore. The neighbor came to grandpa and asked if he would buy it. He said, "Oh, no. I don't want to do that to you. You're my neighbor and you're my friend." So what happened? He really needed to sell the land, the neighbor. So another farmer next door bought the land, and grandpa never expanded his operation. This is where you need to really take a look at the emotions of what's going on with the farm. Take those emotions out and realize you are running a business. Here's something I say often in these conversations. Equal ownership doesn't always create a sustainable operation. I'm going to say that again. Equal ownership doesn't always create a sustainable operation. I once worked with a family who had 4 kids, 1 farming and 3 in town. Their original plan was to divide everything equally. But when we sat down and started running through their numbers, it really became very clear that the plan might eventually force the sale of land. That was never their intention, and they weren't trying to break up the farm. They just wanted to be fair. So we started looking at other options. Maybe the farming child receives operating assets. Maybe the other children receive different assets. Well, maybe there's life insurance policies for the off-farm kids. Or maybe there's a buyout structure over time. The conversation changed from equal to sustainable. The real goal wasn't dividing the land. It was protecting both the farm and maintaining the relationships between siblings. So I'd say they dodged a bullet on that one by making sure they sat down to create a plan. Now, sometimes succession conversations take an unexpected turn. And every once in a while, the topic shifts from land and ownership to a more emotional tie to the farm. What is that? The family name. I worked with a client who lives on her grandparents' homestead. Her dad only had daughters, so technically the family name ended with that generation. But there was a lot of pressure from grandpa. So she got married, had 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. The girls grew up, married farmers of their own, and moved away. One of the boys came back to farm. Now that son only has 1 boy. And suddenly the conversation with grandma in the family became, well, he's the one that will carry on the family name. But here's the reality. Grandma was creating extra pressure to make sure that only grandson comes back to farm. He's still young, and nobody even knows if he'll farm or come back to the farm. Yet sometimes families place a lot of emotional weight and stress on that idea. The farm should be continuing through that last name, not setting it up for financial success to see it succeed. Your farm legacy isn't defined by the last name on the mailbox. Now let's go back to that ranch family I mentioned earlier. The one where the son had 2 daughters and the dad kept asking him if he'd try again for a boy, to carry on the family name. And unfortunately, that pressure affected the relationship with his daughter-in-law. But here's the thing, times have changed, and we need to step back and really think about it. Gender has nothing to do with someone's ability to run a farm. Some of the best operators I work with today are daughters. Heck, even my own 2 daughters are some of the best equipment operators around. Women are managing operations and running ag businesses, as well as making financial decisions and leading family businesses. Agriculture looks so different today than it did 50 years ago, and the next generation of leadership might not look the way past generations are expecting it to look. I once worked with another family that had 2 sons and a daughter. Everyone assumed the boys would be involved in the farm. That was just tradition. The boys come back to farm and the daughter went off to college. The boy stayed closer to home, but over time, one son moved away and the other one decided farming just wasn't for him. And the daughter, which of course no one expected, ended up coming back. She had management skills and was interested. During our family meeting, she said, I always assumed the farm wasn't an option for me because I had 2 brothers that lived closer to the farm. But she wanted to run the farm, but no one ever considered her. Today, she runs that operation and is doing a darn good job at keeping it going and expanding the number of acres her parents originally farmed. So what these stories show is something important. Succession planning isn't about gender, and it isn't about the last name. It's about who's capable and committed to put in the time and keep the business moving forward. Because the farm doesn't care what your last name is. The cows don't care. The crops don't care. What really matters is whether someone is ready and willing to carry the responsibility forward. The goal isn't choosing the right child. It's creating the right plan. Here's another situation I probably see the most. The family that brushes it under the rug and says, we'll deal with it later. I met with a couple where the dad was still farming into his 70s. His son had been helping for years. So they talked about a plan, but nothing had ever been written down. They didn't even have an ownership plan or a transition timeline on when dad was going to stop farming and when the son was going to be able to take more management duties. So when I asked the dad what the plan was, he said something, I've heard this before, but he said, well, someday it'll all be his. Someday it'll all be his. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. Well is a deep subject, and Sunday is not one of the days in the week. The son did say just this: I don't know when someday is, Dad. That uncertainty makes it really hard for the next generation to even plan their own lives. Should they invest in equipment, expand the operation, move their family back to the farm? Those are big decisions when the timeline isn't clear. Succession planning isn't just about what happens when someone passes away. It's about creating clarification while everyone is still here to even talk about it. Every farm family has a different story, different kids, different personalities, different expectations. Some families worry about fairness. Fair has always got to be equal. No, it doesn't. Some worry about the family name. Some worry about keeping the land together. But the families who navigate the succession the best usually have one thing in common. They started talking about it earlier than they think they even needed to. Not with having all the answers, but just laying it all out on the kitchen table and starting the conversation. At the end of the day, succession planning isn't about giving everyone the same thing, and it isn't about carrying on a last name. It's about creating a plan that allows the farm to continue into the next generation while keeping the family relationships together. Because the goal isn't just passing on land, it's passing on the opportunity to continue the legacy. And remember, at the end of the day, fair doesn't mean giving everyone the same thing. It means giving the farm the best chance to survive. All right. Thanks for joining me today on the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. If this episode really made you think about your own farm's future, consider sharing it with a family member. And when you do that, sometimes the best way to start the conversation is simply just by listening to these podcasts together. So I encourage you to share it with someone in your family. And if you want more tools and resources on farm succession planning, you can find them at pathfinderlegacy.com. Until next time, we'll see you between the ditches.
Thanks for listening to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast, where your future is our focus. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and visit us at pathfinderlegacy.com to start building your transition plan today.